Hello, once again. This is Luiz Lima. You are on Kardec Radio. This is Spiritism, a closer look. We do this every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Every week we take a subject, a topic, and we do a 30-minute program about the topic. Sometimes I have somebody with me here. We do some sort of a chit chat. Today I'm going to do it by myself, so I'm hosting the program for you. And here's tonight's topic. I'm going to take a closer look at our evolving world. If you have any comments or questions, you can use the contacts provided here on the bottom of your screen via email or kardecradio.com or our Spiritism A Closer Look Facebook page. Okay, so let's get started, right? Our evolving world. Well, evolving equals changes, right? Progressive changes, right? Evolving means changes, but progressively. When I was going to put a title to this thing, initially I came with Our Evolving Planet. But then I said, hold on, planet means the physical only. I mean, of course, you can consider more than the physical, but primarily you think about the actual physical planet and so and so and so in the shape of a sphere. And I said, well, what we're going to talk about is more than just physical, it's way more. So that's why I decided to call Our Evolving World, because when I say my world, it involves a lot of other things. Okay. So this creates a lot of challenges. So evolving has to do with physical, intellectual, and moral. And these are all changes in their own pace, in their own way. And we are in the middle of all of this. So how do we go from here? We see all these wars and tsunamis and hurricanes and a lot of things, a lot of disasters and accidents. And what do we take from it? Well, okay, here's an idea. On the physical side, let's take a look at three things, right? Physical, intellectual, and moral. Physical. If you go back, say, 7,000 years ago, so that's about 4,000 to 5,000 years before Jesus, we had almost nothing. At the most, we had fire and wheel, which were real, positive discoveries. They were leaps of, progress at their time, of course. But, this is 6,000 years ago. When you look at the world today, physically, look what we have. We have a lot more. So the world itself, the planet itself, it's always changing. And you see, if you go back to, say, 3.5 million years ago, we have the first cells. They were the first inhabitants of the planet, the amino acids and the first forms of life, cells, proteins and cells then. That's 3.5 million years ago. Today, it's different. We don't have single cells or unicellular forms only. We have a much more complex conglomerate of life, if you will. So things did change from those days. The first, albuminous cells and so. So there was a tremendous change in the physical part of our world, including the planet. So physical. Number two, intellectual. If you go, that one, you don't have to go too far, right? If you go back 30 years ago, right? 30 years ago, we don't have internet. Internet became commercially available in late 1992. It's going to be 30 years now. Without the internet, our kids ask us, what did you do before the internet? They can't even think about not having it. When their internet drops or goes down for 30 minutes, they go bananas. So that's only 30 years ago. Tremendous change in the intellectual side. And the third, the moral side. Was there any change, or things are worse, or they're the same, or they're better? Well, if you go to the beginning of civilization, that would be like 250, 240,000 years ago, when the first anthropoids were incarnated on Earth. That's the first human incarnations on the planet. Can you imagine how they were barbarians? Much more, many, many, many times more than what we can ever imagine. And we think it's bad. But if you look back into those days, they were incredibly worse than we are. So yeah, there was physical, intellectual, and moral changes. However, they do not follow the same pace. Moral is the one that takes longer. Everything is very delayed. I'm going to use the word delayed because it could be faster. We delay because our free will. So things don't go at the same pace. With all these changes, a lot of challenges come towards our way, and we have to face them. But this challenge, they also mean growth. Like I showed you a few things that how much that changed. So there is growth, and that's the main purpose of all these changes to take place. Sometimes we just don't like changes, but they create challenges, and the challenge of going through a leap from trials and expiations to regeneration, it's a leap. It's a lot of to take in, if you will. So the changes begin, morally speaking, the changes begin when we are moral and intellectual. We are simple and ignorant, and we have a destination. We don't have a destiny per se, but we have a destination, which is perfection. So from simple and ignorant to perfection, of course, there's going to be a million changes. And it's going to be within any lifetime that we ever had or have or will have. And, within a lifetime, there is change intellectually, morally. So things are always evolving. To get to perfection, it means that I have had the opportunity, and I made good use of it, to be absolutely everything, to experiment everything that was ever possible. Everything. All types of wrong behavior, all types of right behavior, being in female bodies, male bodies, anything in between, from all the way down from unhappy towards all the way up to happy, and anything in between. We will be happy, we will get to perfection once we have experienced and experimented all of these things. So the progress, walking through this, it is, of course, difficult. It's a challenge. Now, why is it so difficult? And I want you to think about the question this way. Let's take this one lifetime. Let's take this last 3 years. So we don't have a span of too many years. Let's just concentrate on the last 3 years. Why was it so difficult? I wanted to go this way. The people with me means family members, co-workers, colleagues, people that I have to, in a regular basis interact with. So those people, I wanted to go one way. Somebody else wanted to go another way. The third person on a third way. Why is it so difficult if we are all going to get to the same final destination? The answer is because we are not all using the same reference to get to perfection. When I use my reference, I establish my path. When my neighbor here establishes his reference that is different from mine, it's a different path. So you see, the problem is not the destination. The problem is the reference that we use. We have a moral reference, absolute reference that was given to us 2,000 years ago. That's the moral of Jesus. But If we do not all use that, we create different paths. If we all decided, you know, general uh, uh, Christ consciousness hits everybody, and tomorrow morning we all decide to use the same one reference brought to us by Him, nothing like this would take place. None of these confusions, none of these wars. They are in place because the guy who declares war thinks he's completely right. The guy who does bullying thinks he's completely right. The guy who does, everybody thinks they're completely right, and everyone around them is wrong. Well, it is so because we are not all using the same reference, which makes it even worse, much more complicated, and the challenge gets to be 100 times more difficult than what it should be. So now we go into wars and tsunamis. I'm in Florida here. I'm in Central Florida. I'm based in Central Florida. 2 weeks ago, we just had I don't know if you heard on the news, a hurricane coming through, Hurricane Ian. And Ian, on his path, he made a lot of destruction. It was for the state here, Florida. It was, in terms of financial hurt, it was the worst of all of them. In terms of destruction, houses down and stuff, it was the worst of them. And it's just going to take a lot of time to get everything back in place. We had some death, unfortunately. So these things happen, and we most of us don't have a clear answer why. And then the typical questions arise. Where was God when that happened? Where is this? Where is that? Why me? Why those? What I like in Spiritism, it took me a very, very, very long time to get it. But once I got it, I fell in love with it. Hopefully you got it already. Spiritism teaches a philosophy that is not intuitive for us, because it's kind of, if you're talking to somebody, each one in one side of the desk, it makes you change to the other side of the desk. And why is Spiritism presenting everything from another perspective? Answer: because it doesn't come from any human. It comes from the spirits. They are sitting at the other side of the desk. So they will put their perspective on life and present that to us, just like Jesus did, because he was on the other side of the desk. He just had to come down to make it happen. But he's looking at life from the other side. So for us, it becomes non-intuitive. And then the question is, how come a hurricane does what it did here for us in Florida? So here's the answer from the other side. We got to change the way we think. We need to understand the logic behind the thinking process in Spiritism. First of all, God doesn't pick and choose. It wasn't, today is going to be those guys down there in Florida. He doesn't pick and choose like that. I'm going to hurt those guys in there, then the hurricane is going to make a path here so it doesn't hurt these other people. Then it goes north and it hurts the people in the north, but not the people in the east. There is no such a thing. This is pick and choose. God doesn't do that. So there is a purpose in all of that. And that's very difficult for us to understand. But we got the answer finally from Spiritism. Why do we have hurricanes, wars, tsunamis, and events of destruction, massive destruction, I would say? Think about this. What is at the top of the reference brought in by Jesus? Charity. Form of love, right? Charity. What happens when you are living in a place where no one does charity work as they should? Not talking about almsgiving, nothing like this. Charity as Jesus understood, as he meant. When we do not do any charity, we are going to have to go through processes that will make it happen that way, that will force us into charity. It's going to be forced because charity is not yet automated in our perispirit. It's not automated in our hearts. So we need to be put into situations where we have an opportunity, almost forced opportunity, almost imposed to do charity. So we got tsunamis and hurricanes and earthquakes. What happens when these things, happen in our lives, in our society, in our country, whatever you are? We all rush to do charity, each one in our level. Some will do, help with the money. That will, of course, the money is important. Some will provide food for those who can't get to a supermarket because there is no supermarket open. Some will just do some more psychological approach on those who are suffering. They lost loved ones, and so we see charity flourishing right after these events. Isn't that just beautiful? That's God. That's coming from up there. We don't do charity. I'm going to force you to, because you must learn it sooner or later. So why not now? That's why we have all these disasters and these things. To be forced in a situation where we are given clearly given the opportunity to do some sort of charity. And that's what Spiritism teaches us, to look from the other side, to look at everything is reversed. Take the reference out of you, out of us. Put the reference where it belongs, in the Creator, in the moral, the reference brought to us by Jesus. He came physically here to deliver. So things like aggressiveness, for example, if you look from the other side, if you look from our side, aggressiveness, oh, this guy is no good. I don't want to talk to him. You're going to cancel culture, and that's it. That's our perspective. From the other end, aggressiveness just means a very rough, crude, I would say primitive way of asking for help. Asking for help. That person does not know how to do that. So they are aggressive. And that's all it is. That's all aggressive it is. Aggressiveness is. And so it is for bullying, and so it is for hostility, and so it is for revenge, anything. These are forms, primitive forms of asking for help. They can't ask, they don't know how, or they think it's just shameful. Isn't that beautiful if you think about it? Think about it. Where else are you going to find this explanation that opens up your eyes, minds, and hearts for a better understanding of life? All of these things are happening in our lives in a very accelerated pace. Of course, there's one after the other, especially these last 10 years, I would say the amount of changes that we have seen across the world in general, in all segments, politics, economy, healthcare, sports, music, everything. So you see, we cannot stop this train at its tracks. We cannot just put our hands like this and stop. No, we don't have that power. So we have to cope and embrace with the changes. If we don't, we're going to be degraded to another world, less advanced than this is. There are worlds worse than this, several. So Spiritism teaches something like this, for example. Look at a turmoil. It's awful, it's complicated, it's everything spinning out of place. And Spiritism teaches us how to find peace, how to find harmony within the turmoil. And that's where we're going to concentrate. We're going to take that little seed of harmony within the turmoil and make it big, greater than the turmoil itself. The turmoil disappears. The Spiritist way is something like this. A look is more than we can see. You can see something, but there's more around it. We can see with two limited organs that we have, our eyes. Some animals, for example, will see much better than we do. So for us humans, a look is much more than what we see. By the same token, a touch is much more than what we feel. And a sound is much more than what we hear. Because there's much more than what we are prone to see. We look at a turmoil and we only see the turmoil. Spiritism says, look at the turmoil, find the harmony in it, and go from there. That is absolutely beautiful, empowering. That is how we find the spark within, find the fire within. So we don't grow cold on life with a hardened heart that, several times over, life after life after life leads to depression or something like that, suicide sometimes. You see, there is more injustice than just revenge. Revenge is a primitive form of asking, teach me justice, because I don't know yet. I haven't got there yet. I haven't understood that yet. That's all it is. Einstein, the great scientist, he used to say something, I just love this. He used to say, when you have a problem, you cannot find the solution using the same mindset that created the problem. The solution has to come from at least one level above it, at least one level above it. So we created all these things. For example, we create the turmoil. If we're going to look at the turmoil with the same eyes, all we're going to find is turmoil. We're not going to see the harmony in it. Right? So all of these things, it takes time to sink in for each one of us. But that's what Spiritism teaches. We know the destination. We already know that destination is perfection. We already know that. So why can't we not live up to what we can be instead of living up to what we are? If I already know that I'm going to be perfect, if I already know that there's harmony in the turmoil, when I look at the turmoil, I don't want to find turmoil anymore. I want to find harmony. I want to find peace in unfriendly situations. That twisted way of looking at things, and why is it twisted? Because it comes from the spirit. It's not a man that decided, oh, I'm getting old, I'm 50 years old, I'm going to retire, I'm going to start writing. No, by no means that's what Allan Kardec did. This comes from the spirits, not from an immortal spirit named Allan Kardec that on that incarnation had the name of Allan Kardec. It doesn't come from the man. It comes from the spirits. Through him to organize everything and pass it along to us, but it comes from the spirits. So we go through all of this. as many times as needed until we get the moral of reference brought to us by Jesus automated in our perispirit. Jesus would, it is absurd from our part to even imagine that somebody needed charity. Jesus is there, they needed charity. Jesus would stop and think, okay, how am I going to do this charity? Let me see what I'm going to do. Let me see if I'm going to do it. Maybe it's lunchtime, after lunch. No, because it was automated in his perispirit. This for charity for us is not automated in our perispirit. It's fragmented. We do charity here and there, rarely, but we do. We know charity, but we cannot sustain. So to wrap up, Jesus brought us a lot of information, a lot of things. I'm just going to take two of them so we can wrap up. Forgiveness and humility. So in a few minutes, right? Because this, we can speak hours about it. So forgiveness. This is what it taught us. Forgiveness will set you free. And I will say to you, based on the Spiritist literature, this is what I concluded myself. Forgiveness is a seed. It's the seed for the peace tree. You plant forgiveness, harvest time, you're going to have peace. Peace is a consequence of forgiveness. You don't get there if you have pending reconciliation with the past, because it's going to be hitting your head all the time, hitting our minds and our hearts all the time. So we have to close all the doors to the past by reconciling everything that's still pending. Then yes. And when I forgive everything that happened, then when I, make it all happen, that's for myself. Then I have planted the seeds for the peace tree. Second thing that Jesus tells us, and he actually, these things he didn't tell, he made them, he acted upon it. We saw it right there. Second thing, humility. If you take the gospel, any gospel, in any language, any translation, from any time since it was published, and you pick. In whatever gospel you chose, you will never see something or a situation where Jesus says, try a lot of things. When it's not working, your last resource is humility. Never. You're not going to find this in any translation of any Bible, New Testament, no, gospel. Humility is the first thing. Humility is what opens the doors. If all the doors are closed, it's because it's lacking humility. And he was here to demonstrate, with all his humble attitudes, was washing the feet of his own disciples. Humility opens the door. Opens the door for forgiveness, because now, I'm humble. Yeah, I accept everything. Let's just do it right. There's acceptance, self-acceptance. Now I'm going to go and forgive, reconcile with all my past actions. And then I have just planted the seed for a very special tree called peace. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Hopefully it was, it will help you, the insight that we had today. You have on the bottom of your screen the way you can get in touch with us. And we will be here next Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time.